You can put up, there we go, good. Got white popsicle. All right. We're here tonight to talk about communication, and Adondo is going to, there we go, show, yeah, at least something here. This is part one. There will be a part two later that will drill down a little bit farther into actual, practicing conversations. But for our purpose, we need to remember that how we talk matters. And I know we all know that now because of all of the different social media things. We need to recognize that how we think affects how we talk, and how we talk affects how we think. And one drives the other, and both drives our actions. No action will happen without a thought. It just doesn't. It really matters and very complex to think it through, write it out, set a specific time for the discussion. So what that means is you need to make sure that you always have something in your hand, whether it's a 3x5 card when you're talking to people, unless if in the communication between voters. Okay, make sure that you have a narrowed down time. You're not going to spend all day on one voter, and you're going to get to the point and hopefully move on. So, but one of the things that always interests me is a person's perspective. The exact same action can happen, and to me, what would happen to Harvey, and we would come to a different conclusion. And I'm going to use a phone call as that example. And most of my experiences come from my 22 years of working in the prison system and doing drug treatment and working with thinking errors. So we had this one exercise, and basically it was, you just called your girlfriend on the phone from prison, and you're talking, and then all of a sudden it turns into an argument, and the phone goes dead. What happened? So that in unison, every inmate, she hung up on me. Now, that is possible, okay? But it's not the only probable thing that could have happened. And based on their perception, the next phone call is not going to go so well, right? So by challenging our perspective and what we're thinking, maybe we can make that next conversation better too. Again, if the phone went dead and maybe the phone got dropped, and honestly, prison staff monitor them, it very well could have been us that cut it off. So, but getting them to see that once they, said they were in an argument was very difficult. Very difficult to change their thinking patterns. Okay. All right, next slide, I think I need. Next one, there we go. All right, there are different types of communication. You have interpersonal communication, mass communication, organizational communication, writing, listening, gestures, body language, decoding, and haptics. Decoding is the process that we go through when we're talking. So right now, when I'm talking, if I was speaking in Spanish and you didn't know Spanish, you wouldn't understand. Okay? You wouldn't be able to decode my words. Okay? It's also true about highly educated people, PhDs versus a high school graduate. So you have to remember that you have to talk at the level the simplest level you can, right? Haptics is the process of using touch as a form of communication, mostly in regards to how one feels. And we see this a lot whenever we're dealing with a death in the family, and you put your arm around someone or you hug them. We see it football games, baseball games, so there's, you're expressing something and you may not say a word, but given the circumstances, there's an understanding. Now, some of them are a little more complicated. So I'm going to give you an example of me and a warden. This is a private prison I was monitoring, and the warden and I have had some difficult conversations where I had been taking money from them because they weren't performing. He was an ex-BOP warden. By that, I mean he retired from the Bureau and then went to work for the corporation. And so the hallways in prisons are long and wide, okay? I would say wider than hospital prisons, okay? So they're long and wide. And so I'm coming out of one housing unit and I'm headed down towards food service inside the hallway. And I feel someone grab me by the neck and my arm. So his left hand's on my neck, his hands on my arm. Okay, and at the same time, he does say, "How you doing, Linda?" Okay, which is not how we addressed each other, number one, ever. There's inmates in the hallway coming and going from everywhere. So as you would imagine, my reaction was not very good. I did not confront him there at the time, but I did turn in such a manner that his hands came off of me. And I said, "How about we meet in your office?" So given that, my perspective was he is trying to show superiority and intimidation in front of the inmates. That was my take. He said that he was just saying hello. And, he's a little touchy-feely. So we had to agree to disagree on that. And you can take that for yourself and decide for yourself. I will tell you this, in he lasted about 4 more months and then he was gone. So again, perception and what the person means may be different. I just don't happen to think I was wrong that time. I'd never seen him do it to any other Bureau staff that came to visit. So keep that in mind when people are talking to you, and call them out. Okay. All right, next slide. All right, the basics of effective communication, there's basically 4, okay? It's speaking, listening, writing, and reading. Now, everyone should understand that once communication is out, once you've said your sentence or whatever your pitch is, it has hit that person's ear and it's irreversible. Okay? You should always strive to be clear, concise, concrete, correct, coherent, complete, and courteous. So once you have sent the message out there, let's take a husband and wife, and things ain't been going good, and yeah, I want a divorce. Okay, once you put that out there, that's hard to come back from. Okay, and I know people who will say the most god-awful thing, and think they can take it back. But it's not been my experience that works very often. So if you do these things when you're speaking, listening, writing, and reading, if you try to be clear, concise, concrete, coherent, complete, and courteous, you will build the foundation for trust. Okay? This is why we talk a lot about transparency in the Democratic Party. Okay? With transparency comes trust, because everyone has the same information. Okay? I always like to say, keep it short and simple. Use plain, simple words. Avoid acronyms, and the government is the god worst about that. Organizational jargon, like, hey, did you go to the hole today? That's the special housing unit, and that's what inmates call it. Okay. We try to avoid that jargon. So if I'm talking to an inmate and he says that, I'm going to say, no, I didn't go to the special housing unit today. Complex words are rarely necessary. Most things can be said in the 300 or 400 words that everybody knows and understands. So if you can just remember KISS, keep it short and simple, no matter what the communication is. And always make sure you're being clear, concise, concrete, factual, telling everything that they need to know, not more, not less, and be courteous. And I think we're all missing a little bit on the courteous side here lately. I think we could all do better. Some other factors that you should think of or think about before you speak. You should think about what you're going to say, even if it's only for 10 seconds. They say something, you wait 10 seconds. Also be aware of whether you are actively listening. Okay. By that, I mean, I'm not thinking about that damn bill that I got to figure out how to pay. Okay. And that is really hard for inmates because they've got so much going on. You know, they're incarcerated. They're trying to stay in contact with their family. And sometimes they are not paying attention to what you're telling them. What is your body language? That kind of goes back to the haptics, but you can also tell by body language and facial expression if someone is getting annoyed or not understanding. So be cued into that. Are you being fair and treating everyone with respect? And that goes back to the courtesy. They were inmates and I was staff, but at no time was it allowed for me to speak to them in a manner that was disrespectful. That was a code violation, an ethics code violation. And those of you who know me know I take rules and regulations pretty serious. So, are you being real with a positive attitude and responding with facts and compassion? Everybody, the inmates have another expression. Are you shining me on? Okay. And we get a lot of that from our Democratic leaders. They say what we want to hear in hopes that we will go away. And that's true probably of all of our representatives. So always try to be real with what you're saying and positive and respond with facts and compassion. Now, does that mean that the person receiving the message may think it's positive? I'll give you an example. I've got a candidate that wants to run. They've never ran before. They want to run for U.S. Senate, and they're running against someone who's in the primary who's already, established. So when they come in here, what should my message be to them? It should be real. You have every right to run. Okay. And I personally like you as a person, but you have to understand you're going up against a known person. So do I think you will win the primary? That depends on the work and messaging and money that you have. And that's how I leave it. They don't usually leave here thinking that was a positive conversation, though. But it was as positive as I could be and still tell the truth. Okay, I think I need another slide here. Moving into something. Yeah, those are the other factors. Who's your audience? Active listening. Think before you speak. Watch your body language and your facial expression. Be fair. Treat everybody with respect. And be real. And let's go back to the incident I had with the warden. Do you think I had a lot of trouble sitting down and showing respect after that incident? Okay, yes, okay. But it still can be done. And that is what they were paying me to do. So that's what I did. He's still warden. That's how I will address him. Okay. Doesn't matter that the incident happened. What matters is that he and I get to some sort of understanding, or that my superiors take some kind of action, which is what happened. Okay, next slide. This is taking longer than I thought. Okay. All right, political communication. It's basically a subfield of communication and political science together. It is concerned with the how information spreads and the influences politics, policy, policymakers, news media, citizens, and it affects everything across the local, state, regional, and national and international issues. So, and I know y'all know this, the way information is sent out now is so different than it was when I was in high school. Okay. Now there's way too many ways to communicate, and not everyone thinks before they hit the send button. Okay. That's why we have a lot of the misinformation that we have out here. So that's why we talk about it. That's why we have to keep it, in our forefront of our minds. Okay. Had several conversations lately with Rick Rhyme, who replaced Dexter at District 85. And I find him to be sincere, caring, and compassionate. So he is not a representative like Tupperville or Barry Moore. Okay. And I've had conversations with them. So it matters that we recognize these people and work with them as best we can. Those that are willing to listen and talk to us. Okay. Political communication is always affected by the structure of the nation states, totalitarianism, authoritarianism, and democracy. And they do not operate the same. The goal in democracy is to get all the information out and be transparent and be a pretty decent communicator most of the time. With the other two, the nation states decide what information the citizens are going to hear. They control the media and everything. So again, I feel strongly that we have to hang on to our democracy, and we have to be a lot better about our messaging and communication. Next slide. Okay. So what do local organizations need to know? Okay. Well, you're going to need to know how to prepare for and hold meetings, be it organizational meetings, special meetings, or general meetings. These are all different. Okay. You never want to go into a meeting without some sort of outline or agenda. Okay. And to the best of your ability, you want to stay on that agenda. Okay. An organizational meeting is actually, when the Democrats talk about this, you're talking about inviting a whole bunch of people to a meeting to actually build the party. So we did this in Henry recently, and we've done it in a few other counties as well. Nobody was doing the job or the work, so Ben Harris called the meetings, and the people that showed up made up the core of the party. And then they elected among themselves their chair, vice chair, and that kind of stuff. A special meeting can be anything from a meet and greet, a special speaker, or a forum. Okay? And each one of those requires a little bit of different communication skills. And your general meetings are like the ones I hold every month on a third Thursday. I tell people what has occurred in the last 30 days. I give them a treasury report. I tell them what's going to be happening in the next 30 to 90 days. And then we usually have a chance at the end where everybody can put in their input. I also have business and finance meetings. I'm trying to think, seems like there was one more that I do. But we do the business and finance so that we can work up a budget. Okay. All of these we have examples of. I mean, the agenda sample is actually in the bylaws, but all of these others, it's really easy to reach out to somebody and say, hey, can you send me a template? All right, you need to know how to prepare for and hold a candidate forum or debate. Okay. Those can be done in many different ways. I prefer to get the questions ahead of time if I can. But if I can't, I have 3x5 cards where I allow people who are coming in to write their question down. And then we pick them up before we ever ask the candidate the question. We read through them and make sure there's no duplication. You need to know when and how to publicize the meetings and what documents to distribute afterward and to whom. Okay. If you're going to do a media release, a good rule of thumb is always make sure 3 other people read it before you hit the send to the press. Okay. I use my secretary, treasurer, and vice chair the times that I've done that. Okay. So once you do that, you always want to keep a clipping of it if it gets printed. Right. What documents do you distribute after these meetings? The only ones that we're required to send minutes up on are our organizational meeting. So you're not likely to have more than one of those a year. But since we are required by bylaws to meet 4 times a year, I make sure that I have minutes on all of my meetings, but I only send the quarterly ones. And I send them to the state office. 9 times out of 10, they don't even open the email. If a voter in your district says, hey, I want to see your treasury reports, or I want to see your meeting minutes, I have hard copies here. I tell them to come to the office and preview them. Okay. What medium or place will you use? Are you going to use a virtual meeting like we are now? Is it going to be in person, or is it going to be a combination? This one is combination because I've got Harvey with me today in my office. Okay. So how and when to use voter database such as Vote Builder. I wish I could share with you that the Vote Builder was beneficial to me, but no matter how much I work with it, I still can't. I just keep thinking there's got to be a better way. But I am going to get some more Vote Builder training this month, so maybe they're going to answer my questions. Document sharing to enhance efficiency in the democratic process across the experience levels. Okay, it's just better if you do everything in Google, and that way if you need to share it with somebody and they can edit it, okay, or they can, as in this case, Adano can put it up on the screen for me. It fills in the gaps. So it also leaves a record for future prosperity. In other words, when the chair that comes in behind me, they don't have to recreate the whole wheel. They can look back on the Google documents and see pretty much what's been going on. Okay. All right, next slide. All right. So who do we communicate with? Well, we communicate with all elected officials. And why? Because their policy decisions affects everything in our lives, from the quality and quantity of air, water, food, housing, roads, medicine, clothes, schools, justice system, childcare, electrical grids, automobiles, public transportation, and commercial goods. and they levy taxes on us to pay for those things, those shared services. And I'm sure there's many, many more that should be in there. We have to have these conversations. I'll go back to Rick Ryan. Okay, most of you are familiar with Appleseed and the two bills that they were trying to get passed, one of which was stop taking people's driver's license when they can't pay their fine so that they can go to work. Appleseed presented that, and he changed his mind, even though he was getting a lot of pressure from his consultant to not vote that way. And there was one other one, I just can't remember what it is right now. So communication with our elected officials will work for those who are caring, compassionate, semi-competent. We're going to communicate with citizens, voters, and non-voters. The non-voters are the tough ones. They say they don't do politics, and then I refer back to why we talk to people. It affects your whole life. Okay? And then local nonprofits and community activists, local and state. That has been a hard thing to get a hold of here in Houston County. There seems to be cliques of nonprofits, of people who only want to work with certain people. So it's taken me about 3.5 years to gain some credibility with them. And now I really feel like this next year is going to be a productive year. I have several of them already, hitting me up and saying, hey, when are you going to do some civic engagement, or can you come do it? So I'm feeling a lot better about it. At first, I thought it was just never going to happen. But that seems to have changed over the last couple of months. Okay. All right, next slide. This is a very important thing, I think. Representatives are not elected to act on their personal belief systems. Mm-hmm. They are elected to make governmental policies that serve the greater populace in the least restrictive and cost-effective way possible. Okay. This is something I try to share with every representative I talk to. We, the citizens, must remind them of this every day, apparently, because as soon as they get out of sight and out of mind, they go back to their legislator and start making decisions that make no sense. So that's basically it. We will have a part 2 to this, and I can't remember the month right now, but there is a part 2 coming. I hope that you at least learned something from this presentation. And I know I probably talk kind of fast. I'm sorry. I don't know why. Probably because it's hot in here. And I don't want to be here any longer than I have to. So please send me comments back. I'm going to put my email in the chat. And if you'll just let me know what you think, what I could have done better. And if Adondo would like, he can open it up for comments or questions.
Yeah, this would be a great time to open it up for comments and questions. And since we didn't have anything, well, actually, before we get into that, first, Linda, thank you so much. We appreciate your time and your expertise. If anybody feels like it, you can quickly unmute and clap, or if you would like to just clap in the chat or whatever. Thank you, Linda. Actually, I had a question of my own, and also if anybody else in the audience has some thoughts on this, I'd be really interested to know. Linda mentioned the importance of keeping communication, keep it simple, stupid, right? Or the nicer KISS acronym that Linda used. I remember hearing at I can't remember what it was. I think it was I studied public health, and I believe in one of our classes it was talked about when you're doing research or when you're talking to the general public, you should make sure that your communication, both written and verbal, is best practices is to keep it at, I believe, a 5th grade reading level. Does first off, I'd like to hear if that sounds right to people, and also kind of a follow-up. Does anybody actually know what a fifth grade reading level means specifically?
No, I can tell you that the newspapers used to write in the old days at a sixth grade level. That was their goal. Okay. And of course, that all changed, as you can tell. I I do know that I find it beneficial to kind of assess the audience. Who am I talking to? Okay. And then I determine, you know, if I'm going to talk to them professional to professional, okay, or citizen to citizen. Uh, and I think if we do that, then we'll be fine. I have a nephew that's a pharmacist.
Mm-hmm.
He has a PhD and very bright. And my conversations with him are very different than the conversations I have with my nephew who just graduated high school.
Just briefly, there's apps for that. You can actually use apps to assess what reading level your writing is. I used to, when that's what I would do sometimes when I was public speaking to especially classrooms, teenagers, because that was when I had a real job, that was my target audience. And I would sometimes be careful about and use the apps to find the words that were too big for me to be using. They would make me sound pedantic, which is a word that you shouldn't use. But you know, they'd make me sound like I was talking down to them. And it's, so those kind of apps are sort of helpful if you're worried that you have a tendency to use too many multi-syllable words or something like that.
Too many SAT words. Marcia, do you mind putting one or two of those apps in the chat?
Oh, I'd have to, all I do is look them up.
I'll Google it.
It's been years since I was working.
That's fair.
And they're probably brand new ones that are better now.
That's a good point. Fascinating.
Linda, I want to make a comment about what you said about forums, candidate forums, because I know this is a democratic presentation, but organizers from other groups sometimes want to do candidate forums. And so I just wanted, that's just a statement, is even though we're talking about democratic groups, clubs, and executive committees and such, if you're a member of a nonprofit type of political type of group, trying to think of even things like Alabama Arise or the League of Women Voters or those kinds of things, they all do candidate forums about their own issues. And I think it's real important to remember that the information that Linda gave us tonight is so transferable to other groups of people that we may be involved in, including, for want of a better word, my church group. We have to take turns doing homilies. I'm in a home church, okay? We meet at each other's house once a month, and we take turns doing homilies. And a lot of her communication issues are exactly what I go down the list of when I'm thinking about being the one doing the sermon. That's sort of weird, but yeah. Am I noticing what sort of body reactions people are having to what I'm saying about whoever I'm talking about, God or, or some public figure or whatever. So I just thought that what you said, Linda, was so applicable across so many of the ways that we do things and so many groups that we might be parts of. That was really cool.
Does anybody have any other thoughts or comments about the session? I want to give people more space, but if not, I think we can also end early. So I'll give another like 20 seconds if anybody would like to chime in.
Are is this information going to be distributed to all of us?
Yes, thank you so much for bringing that up, Martha. We try to get all the materials to everybody within a week. That does not always happen because we are all volunteers, but definitely before next month's, you'll get an email, and actually everybody who registered, so even those who could not make it tonight, will get an email with a recording of the session, which will be linked to YouTube upload, and any of the resources that we talked about today. In the past, that's included the slides and also examples of tools that we've talked about that members have created, such as Linda. So ideally, we'll get that to you by next week. If not, you will definitely get it before next month's meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Well, on that helpful note, if there are no more comments or questions or thoughts, then I hope everybody else has a lovely rest of your evening. And as they say in business meetings, take back your time. Thank you, everybody. Good night.